Hey guys, maybe you've seen the longer video lecture on equality and affirmative action, but I wanted to come at you with a real quick and dirty one. The other one has lots of great detail. I go into a lot, but if you're a little short on time or that was too long for you, this is the video for you guys. As always, this video here is a really good review of the topics that I'm about to discuss. So, context. Court's ruling in the 1954 Brown versus Board court case gave powerful constitutional weapons to Americans who were fighting racial discrimination. You should remember in the Brown v. Board case, segregation was declared unconstitutional. Spurred on by that case, and then the increasing public pressure in the 60s, Congress passed a series of laws known as civil rights laws to guard against racial discrimination. Two of them I have images of here. We have the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This made discrimination in all public places and the workplace illegal. And then down here, we have a photograph of Lyndon B. Johnson and Martin Luther King Jr. shaking hands at the signing of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act made any of those obstacles to voting illegal. So things like literacy tests, grandfather clauses, etc. We should also remember that the 24th Amendment had abolished poll taxes. However, even though all of these laws are pretty sweet, they can't undo the effects of years, really generations of discrimination, not only against African Americans, but also against Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, and Native Americans, particularly in the workplace. Really what we're looking at is that these groups had difficulty generating wealth, right? Creating wealth and passing it down from generation to generation. They were blocked access to quality and higher education. So quality meaning like good public schools, higher education, admission to colleges. These groups were also systematically denied access for home and small business loans. And then putting it all together, we have the generational trauma that's affected these groups as well. So what can we do about it? Well, came up with this idea called affirmative action. This was a policy put in place by Lyndon Johnson that really starting in the 1960s, as a result of the civil rights movement, the government worked to correct the effects of unfair hiring practices. Basically, what affirmative action, what this policy did, was it required companies to take affirmative action or steps to counteract the effects of past racial discrimination and discrimination against women. So what we're looking at is how do we re-level the playing field? Because it's been like this for so long. So what can we do to kind of bring up this discriminated against group? This was beyond the workplace as well. Colleges and universities that seemed to favor white males when hiring staff and admitting students were also required to practice these affirmative action policies. Not everybody was psyched on this, though. Some people argued that affirmative action does not result in equal treatment. In fact, some critics would say that affirmative action leads to discrimination against white male applicants. Faced with the question of whether affirmative action really does lead to fair treatment of applicants, the Supreme Court stepped in to take a close look at the meaning of equal protection, which we know comes from our favorite 14th Amendment. This video you definitely should watch. I'm not going to play it in any of these lectures because I've realized that the videos don't play well in like me videotaping the lecture, but make sure you go in and watch that video if you're not sure about the case. So unlike the Brown versus Board case, justices in this situation were really divided. Some thought that admissions programs in colleges were a reasonable way to overcome effects of discrimination. The majority, however, rolled backy. Did I lose this slide? All right, back it up. So let me set the scene for you. At the University of California, Davis, the medical school had reserved places in each entering class for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, and Native American students. But in 1973, and then again in 74, this white applicant, Alan Backey, was rejected for admission. He had learned that some members of other racial and ethnic groups were admitted with a lower grade point average than he had, as well as lower test scores and interview ratings. So Backey took the university to court, arguing that he was a victim of reverse racism. As I discussed a minute earlier, the court was pretty divided. The majority is going to rule with Becky. They rule that under the equal protection principle of the 14th Amendment, it was unconstitutional for the admissions program to discriminate against whites only because of their race. The court stated that race could be one of the factors considered if the school wished to create a more diverse student body while treating white applicants fairly. This ruling is confusing. Okay, it's kind of a half measure. Basically, what it says is the goals and the main idea of affirmative action is constitutional. But what universities and what workplaces cannot do is they can't use race as the only factor for either admitting someone or denying someone enrollment in that program or hiring them for that job. So basically, you can, use affirmative action as a guiding principle when you're creating your, next class of students, but you can't have any kind of quota system where you can't say, oh, and, for the class of 2020, we have to have, out of 100, we have to have 10 African Americans, 10 Hispanic Americans, 5 Asian Americans, and 5 Native Americans. I mean, I'm just making those numbers up, but just to show you, like, the ruling stated that colleges and other places that practice affirmative action, they can do the idea of it, but they can't actually use a quota system. Really confusing, if you ask me. This kind of just opened more questions, really. Just some images here to kind of wrap up this short, quick and dirty lecture. This is a Time magazine cover from when it came out. Again, what it means, quotas, no, right? You can't literally number out how many of each type you get. Race, yes, you can use race. Again, we've got our Supreme Court, somebody trying to figure out, okay, affirmative action, well, is it really inaction? Because, we can allow diversity, but no quotas, percentages, no charts, graphs. Kind of raises the question, like, without actually tracking the numbers of these types of applicants, how do you actually deliver on affirmative action? So that is a really quick lecture. Again, make sure you go into the regular slides and watch this video. This is a really simple explanation of the case. And then if you ever want to go back as well, this video is a really good explanation of the topic that I just explained. So I hope this was helpful. And I will see you guys on the flip.